Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Rosa Belerique, the 2021 CAIR president, and I am here to introduce you to our new CAIR Talk series between two presidents, and I have no other than President of WSCUC, Jamienne Studley, as our first guest. How exciting is that? So Jamie is a graduate of Barnard College and Harvard Law. She served as Assistant Secretary of Post-Secondary Education and General Counsel to the U.S. Department of Education. She served as the first female president of Skidmore College and also president of Public Advocates. So without further ado, we are so excited to have her on. Please stay tuned for this interview and more like this to come. See you soon. All right, so we have with us today President Jamienne Studley. Thank you so much for joining us on this Between Two Presidents series. So happy to have you. How have you been? How's your day today? How's it going? How's the pandemic been? Tell us a little bit about that.
It's been long. It's been lonesome, but we're safe and healthy, and my team's been fabulous at WSCUC, and the work is getting done. But I miss the joys. Fortunately, I'm in a beautiful place with a lot of green around me, and that certainly helps.
Absolutely. What's a typical day like for you? Any given work day? What's that like, or even a weekend? What goes on?
Work days are pretty standard. My husband and I get up, have cereal, take our coffee cups to our respective desks, and work straight through until somebody gets so hungry it's time to make dinner. Lots of calls like this, lots of projects to work on, lots of to-do lists all over the desk that used to be just for weekends. The weekends we try and get out, and you mentioned you might be interested in hobbies. So I'll say that kayaking is my favorite activity that we've been able to do. We bought kayaks in the spring. They were very popular. And so we were able to take a hobby that we did on vacations and do it lots more. And it's now going to be time to start doing it again on some of our beautiful Northern California rivers and ocean.
That's wonderful. I've done kayaking a couple of times too, and it's exciting. I've tried paddleboarding too, but that one's a little bit harder. You need much more balance. Kayaking is so fun. I can see you now on the waters. Wonderful. So just in terms of your pastimes and your hobbies, are you watching any shows or books? Are you a Netflixer? Are you watching? What are you watching these days?
Well, both. Books and film. We watch more film and also news TV than we had before this year. In addition to things that lots of people have watched, like The English Game and Borgen, and of course, Bridgerton, we discovered things like Press, which was a lot of interesting drama. But I'm going to call out Dancing with the Birds on Netflix as my favorite recommendation. I'd be happy to drive up their viewership. Dancing with the Birds.
Wow. I'm writing this down. Okay. This is great. I might actually have to link to some of these things. So if anyone's really interested, they can actually click it. And I hear you might be enjoying either cooking or baking during this time. How do you spend your time cooking? Is there a recipe that you're known for in your family?
Well, I am going to share a recipe that has not gotten beyond my husband and me since I discovered it during the pandemic. I haven't made any sourdough. I've done I have to admit to a certain number of chocolate cakes and lots of soup and interesting salad combinations. But I'd be happy to send you and the rest of the CAIR membership the recipe I found for churro donut muffins. My favorite coffee place that sold these shut down completely at the beginning of the pandemic, and I said, I wonder if it's something I can do at home. And sure enough, churro donut muffins are quite accessible and quite wondrous. So I will send it.
Would love to have it. We can certainly share it. Maybe we'll start.
You have to do a lot of kayaking to make up the churro donut muffin.
Maybe at the end of this, we'll have a president's type of recipe book where different presidents can give us their best.
It's a deal.
All
Well,
right.
I bet Joe and Jill Biden would be happy to contribute.
Well, once I get them on the show, we're happy to have them. Wonderful. Well, maybe we should talk a little bit of shop, a little bit of, what's going on in the institutional research accreditation assessment world. And I've always had this problem with institutional research, and I just wonder, how do you describe what you do in layman's terms to folks who either maybe you're at a family event or you're in a group of people who are techies? What do you do in layman's terms?
So, if it's a very short line at the supermarket or the airport, I say I help colleges and universities be sure that they are good enough for our students and that they are getting better. If I have a little more time than that, sitting down at Thanksgiving or something like that, I talk about the role of accreditation and how it helps assure colleges and universities are good enough to deserve students' time and hopes and dreams and the money that their families and taxpayers spend on higher education. We have lots of different missions and subjects and models, but we want to be sure that all of the ones that we approve meet some universal objectives for solid learning and the ability to serve their students. And I talk about the fact that we want to help schools get better, to meet their own goals and to move along a pathway wherever they are so that they can assure success for students, an effective institution, a continuous learning process, and that they're sustainable, that they're going to be able to last because they're guided and governed and managed well.
What do you?
I think that's pretty lay language.
That's pretty darn good. What do you think is a common then follow-up question typically when after giving that story, people are like, okay, well then, how do you do it, or what might be the next question?
Well, the how, I explained the peer review process and that we have standards that are very broad, that we actually are able to fit to institutions as diverse as the New York Film Academy and CSU and UC schools, and small specialized graduate programs in psychology and naval leadership. The things that people ask about tend to reflect big higher education issues. Why does college cost so much? Does college really prepare people for work? And but it seems like there are some schools that just aren't good enough. Why does that happen if you're watching for quality across the board? Those are challenging. Some of them are accreditations issues. Some of them go beyond us. And some of them we are learning to take more seriously, along with our institutions, like affordability and making clearer how college and university education does in fact prepare people for work, but we need to do the translation and the add greater clarity to the ways in which that takes place.
Oh, wonderful. Those are wonderful questions that someone might ask you. I hope that that's not what your Thanksgiving looks like, but if it is, I'm going to borrow some of that too when I have to explain part of the work that I do. All right, so I wanted to talk a little bit about institutional research's role in accreditation, and I could see now since you've taken over in this role that data analysis, better conversations, better data has become in the forefront, and that's really exciting for institutional researchers who are like, thank goodness, like we're ready, like tell us what we need to do. In a recent newsletter, you mentioned that we're retiring the graduation rate dashboard, the IEEI. And some new benchmark projects are coming up. What do you see as the role of IR in the future and the need for data analysis? Because many of these reports come from the IR offices or an equivalent. So do you see us being more involved in accreditation and assessment than before?
I certainly do. And when I last met with CAIR, when Brianna was president, I made sure to issue that invitation and to talk about the leadership role and the way IR professionals can do what they must do in providing the material for those conversations, but also making them better, richer, more connected. So I think IR's roles include helping institutions frame questions. Sometimes the leader or the president of an institution knows just what they want to understand, but often the school or a unit of the institution has not articulated its question clearly, which is critical to the research agenda. And the more the IR professionals can help, obviously working side by side with their colleagues, can frame good questions, the better the whole project will be. Yes, you gather the knowledge to address those questions. Then as the loop continues, I'd like to think that IR has an opportunity to continue in the projects enough to say, how is this going to apply into the virtuous cycle of program improvement or institutional change? And what will we look at later? Or what's the next step? Or what's going to happen? And how can we help you understand whether it's generating the effectiveness that you're looking for? So it's partly to say, getting IR out of a little box of give me the number, crunch the numbers for me, to designing the inquiry and then helping the institution see how it can continue the waves of research and review and program change that it takes to make a difference.
Wonderful. And that actually ties into the work we're trying to do at CAIR, where our conference theme for the year is using data for advocacy. And it's really taking data out of crunching and go and do something with it. Advocate it on a committee, speak on behalf of your students, share the data in your accreditation reports, like use it, advocate on behalf of it. So love to see that we're on the same track and path here. We're kind of getting to our final question. So did you have something else to add there, Jamie?
Well, I was just going to say, I love that title, and I will pass it along to my colleague, Stephanie Huey, who's leading at ARC. So this will segue us into ARC. Leading a session on better conversations, better data. And we will in our plenary session where we talk about where we're headed, what our priorities are. I think you'll see a linkage between what we're encouraging and the role that IR professionals and CAIR can play in seeing those roles as significant and interconnected. We also want in accreditation, it's a hope of mine that accreditation will feel like a partner with institutional planning and program design and improvement, not something off on the side that you do separately. So the more that institutions' own goals and analysis can be heard and incorporated in accreditation and respected and valued in the review process that we do, the more it's one steady stream instead of separate, chopped up, we have to do this for one purpose and that for accreditation. I'd like to see those be one big river.
I see that a lot at my institution, because at times I might get like, well, what do you think WSC wants? And sometimes I feel like a philosopher, and it's like, well, what do we want? You know, what do you want? It's really our goals, and we have to show them our process. I always like to say that WSC likes to know a lot about process, not so much about what matters, because you have to have high quality, but it's a lot about the how and the why it's important that we need to show and support. So I have a lot of
right. You know what? I really appreciate and respect the way you put that. There's just one amendment that I would make. It's what we care about is capacity and the application of capacity to do exactly as you said, what your institution wants. We're not about process for process sake. Sure. We're talking, we like to think that we describe the what, the objective, and that the institution fills in the how are we going to get there? How are we going to get to a faculty prepared to support our current and future students? If the what is effective governance, institutions will decide how to configure their boards differently, or the relationship of the board and the CEO. We will ask whether the institution has the leadership at that level to make the decisions it needs to make. That
distinction. Yep. I'm totally on board. I accept the amendment. Wonderful. So there's kind of an inside joke in the community, like who might your WASC be, in the sense of who at the end of the day might you have to share your objectives and your outcomes to as an accrediting body? Is there someone?
Well, actually there is. And your question reminded me in the last few days that we should tell people that, and I will mention it at ARC. It's very simple. We get reviewed just the way you do by the U.S. Department of Education, which recognizes accreditors. So the distinction there is we accredit institutions. The Department of Education recognizes accrediting agencies. That accreditation means that when we accredited, that recognition means that when we accredit an institution, it becomes eligible for federal student aid. That's where that federal tie comes in. The process would be familiar in a number of ways, although it is all process, not as outcomes driven. They are trying to move in that direction. I chaired the review committee for the Department of Education that looked at accreditors. It's called NACICI, the National Advisory Committee on Institutional Quality and Integrity, which makes a recommendation to the department about what accreditors should be recognized. So I've seen it from that side. We are literally in the process right now of developing our petition for re-recognition that is due in a couple of weeks. So it puts us very much in the shoes of institutions, understanding what it feels like to have to tell the story of what you do to somebody who passes on you against a set of standards, in this case against a federal law that says what makes for an accreditor that can be recognized.
Wow.
High stakes review for us as well.
Yeah.
The last time we went through this, WSCUC received a 5-year re-recognition with no follow-up actions, which was the simplest, cleanest form of approval. And we are using this petition to explain some of the very things that you talked about, Rosa, the student outcomes, the benchmarking, the move to annual reviews, the contribution of the graduation rate dashboard, and now it's retirement in favor of the next evolution of better information.
Lovely. Well, that's wonderful. Now, is that review a peer review, or is it directly from U.S. Department of Education officials?
It's a review by the staff of the department. NACICI does have, it has 18 members appointed by the department and by Congress, some of whom are institutional representatives and a number of whom have accreditation experience. In fact, I nominated my predecessor, Mary Ellen Petrisco, for NACICI, and she now serves on it, and Ralph Wolf, her predecessor, both of our predecessor, served before that. So it has accreditors, it has people with academic, political, student advocacy experience on it. They all make recommendations to a senior department official of the Department of Education.
Wonderful. And since the well, I forget now what year it was because time has become a strange thing, but in the last year or two, when it was noted that accreditors didn't need to have this regional part of them, has that work changed in terms of what they look for now in accreditor, and might we expect?
It doesn't change those expectations at all. Accreditors have to demonstrate, if we wanted to change, for example, if we wanted to start looking at community colleges, or an accreditor that accredited in the arts wanted to move into a new subject area. But the geographic change only requires a notification to the department. As you recall, WSCUC was the first agency to say that we would be open to applications from institutions outside our historic region of California, Hawaii, and the Pacific Basin. Since then, 2 other agencies have said they would as well, and a third is looking at the option.
Wonderful. Well, that's great. Okay, well, we're going to start talking about the ARC and the theme of the ARC this year, making it real. Tell us how you created that, and do you have a committee that decides on a theme, or is it something that you see as a vision, and How is that decided?
Um, it used to be the product of a group. I have to admit, it's now something that I love doing, and we decided to toss out there based on what we thought would be interesting and build on what we were doing to attract people. So Making It Real was developed last year, pre-pandemic. Real students, real leadership, real results. Because that's what we think we are about. And we also wanted to move from talking to reality. Little did we realize how much reality we would be gifted by this pandemic. So it has become real, and there's an urgency of now, for a number of reasons. The equity imperatives that we knew existed were brought home even more starkly, and the consequences of inequities became very real. That was something we knew was important and was already embedded in what we were discussing, but the moment underlines it. Leadership is always obvious if you want to make change and move in positive directions. And results fits with what we were just talking about in terms of thinking about outcomes. And process tells you what you might do to get there, but outcomes tell you whether you're achieving it and for whom, and whether those results are what you were hoping for, and whether they are fairly distributed. So we decided to just keep the theme. Since we weren't able to hold the conference last year, we had some really successful events, a State of the Community event, in May, a data event, and we decided that these themes were continuing and still created a good umbrella for us to talk about what we're up to. Within it, we plan to talk about what's going on with WSCUC. This is a year in which there are a lot of important changes. We've touched on some of them, like the introduction of peer benchmarking, the opening of national and international accreditation, the directions that we want to move in with equity and inclusion work, and how we can support institutions, and how we are working to support our teams to understand what good accreditation conversations sound like on these important and we all know also sensitive topics. So this is not just your usual updates from WSCUC. There are a lot of important themes that we will discuss there. And then two other plenaries that people won't want to miss. One, some really strong examples of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs on campus. And our conference will take place at about 100 days for the Biden administration. There's a new administration. So we have Michelle Cooper, who is the Assistant Secretary for Higher Education. We also have a new administration coming in at BPPE, which affects the California institutions, and Debbie Cochran, who's been appointed to that role, and comes from TICAS, a very thoughtful organization about student success. Will be joining us along with Deborah Humphreys from Lumina. I think it's going to be a don't want to miss conference. We're also organizing it so we're not trying to run from the edge of the day, from 9 to 5. We've tightened up the schedule so that people can, one, do some work that they need to at this end point in the semester, but also not asking people to be on Zoom constantly. So we've distilled down to the things that we think will be of special interest to CAIR folks and to CEOs and to all of our many different audiences.
Wonderful. And this might be a good time to add that CAIR will be there as part of a special interest segment to any and all who want to join us. We'll be talking about the theme of our conference, which is using data for advocacy. So we do invite you to join us at the SIG. It's Friday, the Friday day of the conference, April 30th at 1. And so the entire conference, our 2021 Making It Real, is virtual. Will be hosted April 28th to the 30th. and we'll get to explore a lot of the topics that Jamie just mentioned. So we hope you'll be there. We hope to see you there, virtually or otherwise. Is there anything else you wanted to add here or say that we maybe didn't cover, Jamie?
Why don't I do one set of highlights for ARC and then go back to close on one of the fun questions that you asked.
Sure.
We have sessions that I think will be particularly interesting to folks. There's just thinking about your interest, Rosa, there's an arts assessment special interest group. And there'll be a whole other set. So we're trying to create ways for people to come together around their particular professional interests. There's one on teaching and learning, one on, there'll be a chance for student affairs people to get together in a SIG. And we have a DEI session. And for people who want to think in new ways, a really interesting one on rethinking and creating an entire new institution, on partnerships and collaborations that institutions are doing. And I think IR people are likely to be asked to help evaluate collaborations and new models that their schools are thinking about. So there are lots of ways to engage at ARC, and we want to be sure everybody can come. So we've priced it at a lower rate since we are, unfortunately, we won't have the banquets and opportunities to socialize that we like so much, but we want everybody to be able to be there. So invite colleagues. There are ways, we've priced it so that multiple people from an institution can come. The more people who come, the lower the attendance fee. And if anybody wants to be there, but price is an object, let us know, because we really want to make this content available. We'll be taping everything and making it available afterward as well. So if those days are too busy, we'll remind you, and we'll have a bank of the content for people to follow up, and we'll draw on it for events that we do later. If I have a second, I'll mention a couple of books, and
Please do.
thank you for the chance. I didn't want to leave it that I was only watching film, although it has become a new tradition. There's a book that might be fun for people in academia. The author, Julie Schumacher, likes to write about higher ed. Wow. This book is written it is a series of recommendation letters from a grumpy professor. I think you'll realize that could be a lot of fun. She also wrote one called The Shakespeare Requirement, about an institution's decision whether to require Shakespeare in its bachelor's program. Again, it's hard to tell whether it's real life or fiction. And I love The Bartender's Tale by Ivan Doig, D-O-I-G. Just good fiction, a different time, a different place. And the most powerful thing that I have just started reading is These Truths. Wow. By Jill Lepore. There's the title. I can make the whole thing fit.
There it is, history.
It's very fat. If you think you knew American history, think again. As many of us are trying to understand our democracy and its sources and what we can change, even just reading the introduction and the first chapter was eye-opening. My book group talked about it last night, and I commend, as I say, even just those first two chunks were powerful, and now I will get back to it because I think I will see things in new ways, which is important.
So important. Thank you, Jamie. I've started reading much more. I had a goal last year to read 30 books in the year, and I did accomplish it. Although that one book might count as 4 or 5. So
yeah, I think so. When I was in 6th grade, I had in my They had put me in a reading group of one because I had outpaced the rest of my class, and they had to figure out what to do with me because the 7th grade was in a different town, in a different building in my rural community. So the teacher just said, start reading books, write a little book review of each one, and I will comment on them, which she did in beautiful Palmer method and turquoise fountain pen ink. I can still picture those pages. And I read 60 books that year. But what I also did was created that habit of reading with somebody, and with my teacher commenting. So thank you, Mrs. Winecoop.
Shout out. I hope they are watching this somewhere. That's wonderful, right? Even from above. So thank you so much for your time, Jamie. This has been such a pleasure. And I think our institutional research community is excited to see a little bit about what you're doing on, personally and professionally, and also guiding us into the work that IR has to do, wants to do, and is happy to do to support our institutions in achieving our goals. So
we really value the partnership and interchange with CAIR, and I enjoyed doing this with you, Rosa. Someday we can turn the tables.
Oh my goodness, would love
or go
to.
kayaking together.
Maybe that with some chocolate bread and your this wonderful churro.
Donut muffins.
Okay,
Yep.
I'm going to follow up with you so we can share that with the community. So thanks again, Jamie, and we'll talk again soon.
Take care. I'll see you all at ARC. Thank you very much for all the work that you do for our students. Bye-bye.
See you then.